The next time you fill up your gas tank or grab groceries, part of that price increase will trace directly back to a diplomatic meeting that fell apart in 2025, and almost nobody in mainstream media connected those two things for you. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which household costs are now on the rise, why, and the one practical move you can make right now to get ahead of it. Here is what we are going to cover. First, how collapsed Iran talks directly move oil supply and your pump price. Second, why that oil price jump hits your food costs in a way most people never see coming. Third, how this feeds a second inflation wave that the Fed is not positioned to stop. And fourth, the one that resolves everything, what you can actually do about it before the price pressures arrive at your door. Let's get into it. Here is the background you need. Since 2018, the United States has maintained heavy economic sanctions on Iran, penalties that sharply limit how much Iranian oil can legally reach global markets. Iran holds about 9% of the world's proven oil reserves. When its oil is effectively locked out of global supply, the global market runs tighter, and tight supply means higher prices everywhere. In early 2025, the U.S. and Iran entered a new round of nuclear negotiations. Talks aimed at limiting Iran's nuclear program in exchange for partial sanctions relief. Vice President J.D. Vance was among the senior officials involved in shaping the U.S. position. Those talks collapsed. The specific breakdown points are still being disputed, but the outcome is not. No deal, sanctions stay, Iranian oil stays largely off the market, and the global energy math changes immediately. Point 1. Oil sanctions and what they do to the price at your pump. Here is the mechanism, stated plainly. Iran was producing roughly 3.2 to 3.4 million barrels of oil per day as of early 2025, according to the International Energy Agency. Under maximum sanctions, only a fraction of that reaches legitimate global markets. Much of it flows in workaround deals with certain countries at discounted prices. The prospect of a deal had already been partially priced into oil futures markets. Traders expected that a successful agreement might eventually add up to 500,000 additional barrels per day back into global supply. When the talks collapsed, that expectation evaporated. Less expected supply plus unchanged or growing demand equals upward price pressure. The U.S. Energy Information Administration has consistently shown that every $10 increase in the price of a barrel of oil translates to roughly 25 cents added to the price of a gallon of gasoline. If crude were to rise $15 to $20 per barrel over the next quarter, a scenario energy analysts have suggested as plausible in a tight supply environment, this could add roughly 35 to 50 cents per gallon at the pump. For the average American driving roughly 1,100 miles per month in a car getting 28 miles per gallon, that is roughly 39 gallons of gas per month. At 40 to 50 cents more per gallon, that is a direct cost increase of $15 to $20 per month out of your budget from one failed diplomatic meeting. That is not alarmism. That is arithmetic. But here is what almost nobody is talking about. The gas price increase is actually the smaller problem. The bigger hit comes from what oil prices do to everything else. Point 2. The food freight problem, and why your grocery bill is directly tied to this collapse. Here is the part that mainstream coverage almost never maps out. Nearly everything you buy at a grocery store traveled hundreds or thousands of miles to get there, and that transportation runs almost entirely on diesel fuel. Diesel prices track crude oil prices closely, sometimes even more aggressively than gasoline, because diesel is the workhorse of commercial freight. According to the USDA's Economic Research Service, transportation costs account for roughly 3.5 to 5% of the final retail price of most grocery items. That sounds small until you do the math at scale. When diesel prices jump 15 to 20%, which is consistent with a $15 to $20 per barrel crude increase, freight costs climb fast, and grocery suppliers and retailers pass those costs forward to you, usually within 60 to 90 days. We saw this exact chain play out in 2022. When oil spiked after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, diesel hit record highs, and grocery inflation accelerated from roughly 8% to over 13% at its peak within 2 quarters. The mechanism is the same now. The cause is different, but the kitchen table impact is identical. A household spending $800 a month on groceries could potentially see that number climb by $40 to $65 per month in the second half of 2025 if freight cost pressures follow the historical pattern. That is real money, that is a utility bill, and it traces directly back to those collapse talks. Now here is the part that makes this worse than 2022, because at least in 2022 the Federal Reserve had room to move. Today that playbook is much harder to run. Point 3. Why this creates an inflation feedback loop that is harder to stop this time around. When oil prices rise due to a geopolitical shock, as opposed to rising because the economy is overheating, the Federal Reserve faces what economists call a supply-side inflation problem. Raising interest rates, the Fed's primary tool, is designed to cool demand. But supply-side inflation is not caused by too much consumer spending. It is caused by production and transportation costs going up, regardless of what consumers do. Raising rates in that environment risks slowing economic growth and hiring without actually fixing the price problem, a situation called stagflation, where prices stay high but economic growth stalls. As of early 2025, the Fed has been navigating a complicated rate environment, with inflation not yet fully back to its 2% target. Adding an oil-driven price shock on top of that gives the Fed very little clean room to respond. What this means for you is that the normal expectation that prices go up, the Fed acts, prices eventually come back down, is less reliable in this scenario. Energy-driven inflation tends to stay embedded longer. Your landlord's heating costs go up. Your Amazon delivery costs go up. Your local restaurant's food delivery costs go up. Those costs get passed to rent increases, menu prices, and shipping fees. The original shock from one diplomatic collapse ripples outward across your entire cost of living, not just for a month, but potentially across a full year or more. So we have established 3 ways this hits your wallet. But here is the question you actually need answered. Is there anything you can do about it, or are you just along for the ride? Point 4. And this is where we close the loop from the hook. Back at the start, we said the Iran deal set a timer on your energy and grocery costs. Here is what that timer looks like and what you can do with it. The 60 to 90-day freight transmission lag is actually a window. Grocery price increases driven by higher diesel costs typically take 2 to 3 months to fully appear on store shelves. That gives you a narrow runway to act ahead of the curve. First, if you have any flexibility in your monthly budget, this is a strong moment to stock non-perishable pantry staples, rice, canned goods, cooking oils, dried beans, at current prices before freight cost increases are passed through. This is not panic buying. This is reading the supply chain timeline and acting on it rationally. Second, on the fuel side, if you have been considering a refinance, consolidation, or any large purchase that involves transportation costs, vehicles, moving, long shipping items, the next 30 days are likely cheaper than 90 days from now. Third, review your energy costs at home. If you are on a variable rate utility plan, this is a reasonable time to inquire about locking into a fixed rate, since natural gas prices also correlate with broader energy market moves. And finally, and this is the broader point, watch 2 indicators over the next 60 days. Watch the Brent crude oil price, which you can track free on any financial news site. And watch the diesel national average, published weekly by the EIA at eia.gov. When diesel climbs significantly above recent averages, historically above $4 per gallon, the grocery freight pressure may accelerate more noticeably. Those 2 numbers will tell you more about your household costs over the next 6 months than almost any other economic indicator. You do not need to be an economist to read them. You just need to know they exist. And now you do. Here is the question for the comments, and there is no right answer here, just want to know where people actually stand. Have you already noticed energy or grocery prices creeping up in your area over the last few weeks, or does it still feel stable where you are? Drop your city or region in the comments. It helps everyone watching get a real-time picture of where this is hitting first. If this breakdown was useful, If you came in knowing the Iran talks collapsed, and you are leaving knowing exactly how that connects to your gas pump, your grocery aisle, and your monthly budget, then this channel is built for you. Every week on Trends Daily, we take one major world event and map it to the direct personal consequences that the regular news cycle skips. Next up, we are breaking down the Federal Reserve's latest signals and what they actually mean for anyone carrying credit card debt or a variable rate mortgage right now. Because there is a specific number the Fed is watching that determines whether your minimum payment goes up or down, and most people have no idea it exists. Subscribe now so that video lands in your feed the moment it drops. And if you want to go deeper on today's topic, the next video on screen breaks down how oil market mechanics work, so you can read those Brent crude numbers we talked about and actually understand what they are telling you.